Okay, so I think we can get started. Thank you all for joining. It's nice to see some familiar faces over here, some familiar names. Yeah, so I can get started with a little bit of an introduction about me. My name is Vidhan Bhaiya. I was admitted into the deferred program at Harvard Business School in July of 2021. And since then, I went through that process. It took me a while to get through it. I spent a lot of time researching, trying to understand what is really, like, trying my best to understand what people look for, what strategies work. I applied to quite a few schools, and I sort of experimented with different strategies at different schools. And I think I began to see trends in what strategies ended up resulting in interviews and acceptances, and what strategies didn't work. So I thought, let me take some time today to share that with y'all. And I'm going to just jump right into it. Um, so yeah, so I think, look, I'm going to start off with like a little bit of an understanding as to, there are two paths to an MBA program, which is a direct entry and a deferred entry. So people on this call are coming in from different places on their journey. So I'm going to sort of start from the basics. Um, so the deferred MBA, which I got into, is simply another path to joining an MBA program. The direct path, which is more common, requires you to apply to the MBA program the year before you plan to matriculate or join. And the thing with the direct MBA path is that you need to know exactly when you're ready to apply, because the chance of being allowed to defer is next to zero unless you have something very serious going on. On the other hand, a deferred MBA sort of, if you might want to do an MBA in the future, but are unsure, when exactly I want to join, the deferred path is something that I think is worth exploring. For example, I got admitted in 2021, and I had the flexibility to start in 2023, 2024, or 2025 as well. So, because deferred MBA programs are tailored towards final year university students, most people tend to think that it's less competitive than direct MBA programs, but it's the opposite that's true. For example, the acceptance rate in um, in your direct MBA program at HBS is typically around, say, 12% or so, whereas for the deferred program it is around 9%, and the acceptance rate is like lower at some other schools. So when you do get accepted and eventually matriculate from either of these paths, your MBA experience remains absolutely the same. You'll be like every other student, eligible for the same scholarships and fellowships, attending the same classes, regardless of whether you join by direct or defer. And I think, look, the key thing here that you need to understand is that the deferred program was made by the colleges to allow people to take some form of career risk. A lot of people today, with the rise in people wanting to pursue startups after college, want to take on some form of career risk in their journey. And the startups might work, but there's a high likelihood that it might not. And the MBA schools, like the MBA programs, they didn't want to miss out on the applicants who might have been otherwise very qualified, but just decided to take a path that didn't show them as necessarily flattering on their resume. And so they came up with the deferred MBA concept. These are some stats which I thought was quite interesting about sort of the 2+2 profile and the regular profile. And this is for HBS. And what I found interesting here was that there are a couple of numbers that I thought were fascinating. One is, of course, the acceptance rate that we spoke about, 9 and 12% or 11% for the regular MBA. Uh, the other key factors that sort of stand out is that the regular MBA sort of does a better job of filling up the classroom with some, I'm going to get people from X number of colleges, from Y number of countries. Whereas the 2+2 profile is a little more limited in their search. Whereas the regular MBA program sometimes prioritizes a diverse class. The 2+2 profile is I'm going to prioritize people who are sort of working on exactly the mold that I need, someone who's taking a risk. Uh, the other thing that I found very fascinating was that the STEM undergrad percentage at the 2+2 program was almost 60%, whereas for the traditional program, it was 38%, which again I thought was very interesting. And so, sort of like it, I think it's an encouraging thing for people with technical degrees to look at applying through deferred MBAs, because Harvard seems to clearly prefer it through that path. And the countries represented was another sort of very the countries and colleges represented was another very a stat that really was a bit unexpected. So so we're going to start with, like, what are colleges which do have deferred MBA options? Some of them are Berkeley Haas, Carnegie Mellon has their Tepper Future Business Leaders program, Chicago Booth has their Scholars program, Columbia Business School's deferred enrollment program, HBS of course has their famous 2+2 program. Even in India, the ISB has a young leaders program, which is the equivalent of your 2+2. I think they're a bit more strict about when you have to join, but it's still a deferred admission. And the Kellogg Future Leaders program, the MIT Sloan MBA early admission, and Stanford GSP has their deferred enrollment program, Wharton also, and the Yale School of Management Silver Scholars program, which they're really trying to pick up reasonably as well. So what goes into the application? The first part of it, and I think the most important part of it, is your story. What sets you apart? And in Harvard, you need to explain this in about 800 to 900, 800 to 1,000 words. And it took me 2 months to figure out what my story was. And this was just me sort of trying to think about who I am, sort of what parts of my personality shaped who I am as a person, and also shaped my ambitions. So like, one of my friends grew up in some of the Caribbean islands where she was really being affected by climate change, and decided to pursue that as a career. But essentially, what is your goal and why is that your goal is something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. So this process of thinking about my story took me a while, and then it took me writing it down becomes easier once you've done that brain dump of exact. And this is a very introspective, reflective process. I don't think the answer can come sitting in front of a screen. It was just like, it was something that I was always playing at the back of my head. So who am I? What's important to me? What do I want to do in the future? And regardless of whether I got in or not, I think that the many hours I spent doing this process was very useful for me going forward in understanding me as well. Because otherwise, I don't think we take the time out to do that. The second part of it is the GMAT and the GRE. And so I see primarily most people here are from Asian countries, and so we probably, since we have typically higher average test scores, we need to look at something which is slightly above the average, 730 plus or a 327 plus on the GRE. And I found, after speaking to a lot of my friends who gotten in, who have done well on the tests, typically needs about 150 to 200 plus hours. This is an average. This is not for everyone. It could take more or less. But, this is typically around 20 days of dedicated study. If you really have nothing to do for 20 days, I feel like you could do this every day for 20 days to a month and get done with this. But typically, that's difficult because you'll have work, school, etc. And so I find that people typically spread this out for over 2 to 3 months. And I think the GMAT is one of the easier parts of the process. And I say easier, not because the test is easy, but just because essentially this is very much in your control. you can keep putting in more and more hours and hope to get those incremental improvements. Next is the letters of recommendation. So you need 2 letters of recommendation, and they typically should reference your story and to be able to talk about key differentiators about yourself. And if your story is that you are going to bring, say, technology to serve minority communities, you want your references to at least show that you have excelled in one element of doing that, either bringing technology to some group or working with these minority communities. You also want your recommenders to ideally use the phrase, this person is among the top 5 to 10% of people that they met in the field. And also, I've written this in full caps. This is one of my learnings, and please don't make that same mistake. It's very preferable to get a recommendation from your direct manager, who may be mid-level but knows you inside out and can describe you uh, in a more realistic and personable way than your CEO, who only knows your name and a few details about you. He might know that you've done a great job. He or she might say that you've done a fantastic job and write it also. But in the letter of recommendation, the amount of depth of interactions that you've had can really show. And sometimes the empty words don't, they just feel like empty words, where they're like, this is the best person I met. Okay, yes, but why? And the CEO is not going to be able to talk about that. So definitely, think about this. The way I would, the strategy that I often think about for letters of recommendation, especially for deferred MBA programs, is you need to look at having 3 people who are your recommenders. 2 should be academic recommenders, and 1 should be a professional recommender. And again, so don't go looking for your deal. Like, choose the professor you've done research with, who was your faculty advisor, or research mentor, or whatever. The reason I suggest 3 is because each college is very specific about the kinds of people they want to be writing your letters of recommendation, and they make it very explicit. So some people are like, we want 1 professional, 1 academic, or some are like, just choose the 2 who know you best. But having 3 allows you the flexibility to choose. And the resume, I'll sort of, that's a big part of the application, but I'll talk about this a little later on. So, so what is HBS looking for? And I sort of like gathered these answers after getting in and then speaking to people who've been in and around the admissions committee, senior counselors, other people who've gotten into these programs. And Harvard Business School thinks like a venture capitalist. Surprise, surprise. They are looking for people that they can imagine will be the leaders of their field. Almost, it can be any field, but based on the potential that they demonstrate now and their background and their competence and so on. So the 2 keywords here are leaders and potential. From my experience going through the application process, I think these 2 things can be broken down even further to highlight 4 key elements of your application that you need to highlight through different sort of the different amounts of space that you have on the application itself. Most business schools will use some different words and phrases to describe them, but the 4 main things that they look for is, leadership. Can you inspire people and impact lives? B, academic prowess. This is a prerequisite for succeeding in competitive MBA courses. Your character, are you driven by a strong moral compass and desire? And mission, do you have a big goal which is supported by clarity on the steps? So I'm going to sort of go into detail about this in the next couple of slides. So leadership, can you inspire people and impact lives? And leadership, people often think about in a very narrow sense, but leadership can come in all parts of your life. It does not need to be that I was the founder of this company or I was the lead at this fest that the school organized. It can be, spearheading a new initiative at work, at school, organizing some community event. And I guess here you need to show your ability to lead diverse groups towards a common goal. And so, so if you've managed some form of cross-functional team to launch a product, or students from different different streams to come together to achieve a common goal, I think that shows your versatility as a leader. And I think the second part of it is your impact of your leadership. So provide very concrete examples of the outcomes from your leadership. Did your initiative increase the company revenue or community engagement? Like, quantify, have numbers for everything. Don't say I did a great job, show how you did a great job, give us numbers. I think it's important in some part of the application to allude towards your leadership philosophy. So articulate, what are the principles that guide you as a leader? Do you prioritize transparency, empowerment, or do you like to sort of lead the way? What kind of a leader are you? And explain how these values have sort of influenced your approach in different kinds of settings, and thereby influence the outcomes because of the way you operated as a leader. So I think this you need to spend some time thinking about, because it's not a very easy thing. But yeah, I think it's worth doing that. And the last one is, reflect on leadership challenges that you've had. A tough teammate, a tough problem to solve, limited timelines, so things like that. So the next the next thing is academic prowess. So they're not looking for, we don't want the smartest people in the room, but you do need to have some form of baseline level of intellectual competence to be able to keep up with very competitive MBA courses, because MBA classes are not easy, they're very rigorous, and you need to show strong analytical and quantitative skills. And any way where you can show that you've demonstrated this form of analytical ability is very useful. Secondly, critical thinking and problem solving abilities. So have you sometime faced a problem which was a big hairy problem, but you sort of broke it down into logical steps and then arrived at a solution? And of course, academic achievements is great to show, but everyone can't have them. So the way you can substitute is through intellectual curiosity. Have you continued to show some form of learning curve across your entire journey? Maybe during COVID, classes were slow, so you took up some coursework, some certificate work, some diploma, whatever it is. But intellectual curiosity is something that's very important for business schools, and something that if you can demonstrate is really nice. Thirdly, character. Are you driven by a strong moral compass and desire? So, they like to see integrity in your personal and professional life. So, of course, everything that you put in on the application is going to be checked later on if you get in. So make sure you don't bluff your way through it. And also, I think, your integrity in your life, places where you've shown empathy and social responsibility. Maybe you've shown your involvement in some form of social initiative, or it could just be that you address the needs of someone else. It could even be in your company, in your school, in your classroom. It does not need to be like someone really underprivileged, but maybe someone from your team who was sort of facing some problem, and you felt for them and did something that helped them. And thirdly, resilience. And I think this is something that is it's not so easy to show, but if you're able to show it, this is something that if you've been able to overcome some form of obstacle, that showcases your growth and tenacity as a person. You persevere through some form of personal setback to achieve some goal. So I think that story speaks volumes about your character, which which is very hard. Like, your recommender can say he's a very tenacious person, but if you showed that no, he had sort of this issue and still worked through his exams and did well, whatever, I think that's an important thing to show. Lastly, mission. Do you have a big goal? They're looking for leaders who want to change the world. They're not looking for They're not looking for people who are small goals. They want somebody who's about to change the world. And also this long-term vision, so it has to be like, something like, I want to lead a sustainable energy company. And then you need to break it down into specific roles within the industry that will take you to leading this sustainable energy company. And so this way, you really need to plan out milestones, because it's important to have this big goal, and then what are the baby steps to continue to get to your goal. And adaptability and continuous learning, it sort of breathes into the previous point that I mentioned, where you have to continue to show some form of intellectual curiosity, and this can be applied to your professional path as well. And maybe there you needed to be a bit adaptable. You thought of problem A, but you realize, okay, into the problem, maybe this wasn't a problem that really needed to be solved, but what I needed to do was A minus or A plus plus. And you sort of like, you showed how your goal itself has slightly evolved because of knowledge that you gained during the pursuit of that goal. I think that shows a lot of commitment towards achieving of a goal itself. So yeah, so I think these are some, there's a lot of information, but these are some, and I'm going to share the slides at the end of this sort of webinar. But these are some important questions that you need to just keep in your mind. You don't have to have answers for these. I found that, it was funny for me. I found like, I think about these questions, and then I'd go for a walk, or I'd go play a game of FIFA. And then when I'd finish, I'd like, suddenly the answers would start coming to me, because your brain sort of like subconsciously starts processing this, because when you sit in front of it, I'm going to write down the answer, it might not come. So that's like my best sort of like best learning. There's actually a biological term to this, engaging this part of your brain called the superior colliculus, which happens only subconsciously, but keep that aside. But so yeah, now essays. People are often stressed about essays, and this is the prompt that HBS gives. They're very broad, they're very open. As we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the MBA programs? So when all the stakes have been satisfied, your essay is what often tips the scale. Is the part of your application that will separate you from the rest of the applicants who have great GMAT scores, great extracurriculars, and so on. So your essay tells the admissions committee a story that nobody else can tell you. So, it highlights the uniqueness of your background. It sort of humanizes your achievements, and it allows a glimpse into how you interpret the world around you. So these are things that would not be very clear through your GMAT or your GPA or your resume. And your essay is really an opportunity for you to be vulnerable. And I'm going to sort of stress that vulnerability is going to be really very important as you sort of go about this application process. And the amount of hours that you spend really digging into your personality and your life, that is going to show, and it's going to show here. So to lean into those unglamorous parts of the experiences that you live, and then that allows you to tell this powerful story of your own, and also the value that you will bring to the business school. So big words, but like essentially like, show them the not nice sides as well. Show them the tough parts of your life. Show them the difficult parts of your life, and how sort of you grew from those. So this is not meant to be a highlights. Don't talk about like, I did a great job at this. No. This was important to me. This is how I went about working for it, and this is how things worked out. They already know that you did a great job. So yeah, and I guess two key questions that people often forget to answer in essays is that, how would this MBA specifically help you get to that goal? Let's be like, what are experiences at Harvard that would help you get to where you want to be? And secondly, how would you be a part of the HBS community? So you're going to be taking some things for question one. HBS will give you this, HBS will give you that, HBS will give you this. But then the question is, what are you going to be giving back to the community that you're in? And they want to be able to picture you as a student on campus. How will you be contributing? Will you be doing a good job or whatever? So these are all things that you can help answer in your essays. Like really put a face, put a personality, put some form of emotion to your story right there. Now, why Harvard? it's an important step to understand the fit with HBS. So you might not find uh, you may not find a specific why Harvard essay anywhere, but Harvard admissions officers will definitely smell out your pseudo fans. You don't need to go tell them Harvard is a great school, it's the top school in the world, yada yada. They know. You don't need to appreciate them. You don't need to flatter them. A good way to, I find a good way to do this is to look for people with similar backgrounds like yours. Go on LinkedIn, search for someone, who came from maybe the same region, maybe did the same kind of undergrad program. And how has their career trajectory changed after HBS? So this sort of helps you also visualize and also get, I think it also serves as a powerful motivator to see, how things change for people. And find, of course, find coursework, clubs and professors who you are excited about and would work with while at HBS. Now, the key, the key thing is that here you have to be very specific. Don't say, oh, I'm going to join the venture capital club. Okay, great. You want to be more specific. Okay, there's Harvard runs the Harvard India conference. There, I have this background in healthcare, so I want to lead a session on digital healthcare in India, where I will bring in my mentor XYZ, who's the CEO of this, whatever. So you're really putting in a lot of detail. You haven't just said, I want to join this club. You're going to say, I want to share this conference. Why do I want to share this conference? What do I bring to this state? What do I think? People often, I would sort of like, other business schools, if your profile contours, your GMAT score and all is great, like they might like be okay with if you just like, tweak some why, say a why what an essay and just put Harvard there. But don't even think about that strategy with Harvard. Like, even if you're hard pressed for time, like, you really have to spend time there to picture yourself at the school. You should feel like by the end of this essay, you should feel like you already go to the school. And, spend a lot of time to do the LinkedIn search. And yeah. And also, when you're doing these searches to see the profiles of people who have gone to Harvard, I'm going to break a sort of maybe a tough fact that if you're not able to find people who have had very similar journeys to yours, or they seem to be a bit unattainable, it might be a good time to refocus your energies on other business schools. But this is and not be devastated when you hear back from the Harvard admissions team. But like, this is not to discourage anyone, but it is just to sort of like ensure that you position yourself for success at a top business school. And I think think about the case study method, whether that would work for you or not. The grading methods, like, think very deeply about these factors, whether you're an introvert or you're or an extrovert. Introverts can sometimes go into school and come out either majorly transformed or completely crushed, because business school is it's a tough place, And so after you've done all this data coalition, research and visualization of yourself at the school, think about yourself and think to yourself and ask yourself, is this a pretty sight or is it a scary sight? And that should help, answer A, this why Harvard question, and B, whether you should be applying to a business school with a case method and so on. So yeah, the resume, I think I find this to be one of the easiest parts of the application, perhaps the easiest part of the application. This is your most important piece of real estate. You have one page to talk about your entire, 20, 25 years of your life. And, the way I would structure it is, education, work experience, other experiences, awards, certifications, and then interests. And put them all in reverse chronological order. Don't say what was more important to you and so on. No, it has to be reverse chronological order, and quantify everything. You didn't work as a business development associate at XYZ. No, you developed 7 new accounts to increase sales by 30% in 4 months. Choose a classic resume format, font size, don't go below 10 points. People can't read. If they can't read, they're not going to be able to see your wonderful achievements. And don't try to get too creative. Don't put your photographs, don't put too many colors. It's okay, it's risky, but like, they want, in the resume, they should be familiar with the format and immediately be able to get to the the information that they're looking for. Okay. Like if you get too creative, they're going to be spending time searching for this, and they just don't do that. And lastly, very simple thing, very obvious thing, but please don't make spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes. Make sure if you have full stops at the end of all your bullet points, make sure that it's there on all your bullet points. If you started off your lines with with a capital letter, make sure that all of them start with a capital letter or not. But be very, very, very anal about all sorts of mistakes that you could be making on your resume. Keep reading through it time and time again. Ask other people to read it and read it with a scanner. Sometimes I like to read it backwards so that I'm not processing information. I'm just sort of scanning for errors. So yeah, so this is that. And a couple of things that I found helpful: try to find a support group. This is a tough process, and try to see if you can find a group of friends, maybe who are applying, maybe from your same college, who can objectively give you tactical advice about how your essay comes across to them, because it sometimes becomes hard to critique your own work. So I like to get a lot of different perspective from close friends and family. Some might be contradictory, but try to just see the general direction of feedback. You'll have to make up your own mind about how you want to portray yourself. But the aim through this exercise is to make sure that the majority of people get roughly the same impression of you as the one that you want to portray. Some prefer to send it to a small group of people. Some prefer to send it to a large group. Both are fine. I sent it to like 40 people. But the median seems to be like, just about less than 10. And, so yeah. So I would get them to read the other parts of the application as well: achievements, extracurriculars. Maybe sometimes your favorite parts of your application might not be that impressive to others. You did this fest that you spent so many hours on in your school. This was this big, huge thing that you put on. It was so important to you. But maybe to the outside person, it might not be that impressive at all. And so here we want to be real, not emotional. So let's find things that would be impressive to somebody who is sitting across the world, might not be familiar with the amount of importance that this sort of competition or fest that you given this competition or fest. But yeah, so just let's be real with our application here. And okay, so interview. If you get through to the interview stage, congratulations, you now have a 50% chance of admission. People like your story, and that's what has gotten you so far. So now you don't need to impress them anymore. They're already impressed. Now you need to focus on just two things. Are you really who? It's not a question of competence anymore, but how do you fit into the HBS HBS community? And secondly, are you truly what you said you were in the written applications, or are there inconsistencies? So, people who just like, whenever I ask people, everyone told me, just be yourself, just be yourself. And I'm like, this is annoying. Like, of course I'm going to be myself, because this is a difficult process. But what do you mean? Like, it's your best advice. But it actually was. And, just stick to the narrative. I found that they would like questions move very quickly from different topics to the other. And they're not trying to like make you trip up. But if you've done what you said you did in your application, it would be true. For me, I spoke about a shoe manufacturing company that I started. And I also spoke about my time when I worked in venture capital. I was investing in deep technologies like quantum computing and synthetic biology. So the questions would go like, explain to me quantum computing in some 5 sentences. Then the next question would be, okay, so where do you live? Okay, so what's Chennai? Okay, so what is the cost of sending a shoe from Chennai to Bombay? Then they'd go, okay, so how much does a shoelace cost? Okay. So the question will keep jumping around. And these are not difficult questions. If I did what I said I do, I would easily know the answers to these questions. But if I didn't do it, immediately you would be found out. Oh, you're not going to guess the cost of sending one shoe from India to Chennai to Bombay or so on. So yeah, so don't have scripted responses. Don't make a list of questions. They're probably not going to ask those. Think about some basic, general guiding ideas and themes that they might question you about, and sort of think about ideas that you have to answer those questions. But don't have a script, because if you have a script, they're going to hate it. So basically, just be human is sort of my thought here. This is a rough timeline for deferred admissions. This is if you really want to stay on top of the game, but like you could start later on. But like you really want to be on top of your game, April to May, study programs and timelines. September, you could look at doing your first GMAT attempt. November, you could potentially look at a second GMAT attempt. December is when you can introspect and think about your story and the hook to your profile. And in Jan, you should look at, asking your recommenders and sending them the link. So from each application, you need to sort of send them a link. And so it's there in their inbox. And so then you can begin work on your essays. In Feb, you're writing, reading, revising again and again. And March, you're finalizing the application and submitting. So if you do this, you're doing, you're working at a good pace, a comfortable pace, and so on. So yeah. And you got this. I think HBS and other top schools are definitely a life-changing experience. Something that they often said was, the world comes to Harvard. While this means that, it is a super competitive process with a low acceptance rate, your choices are 0% if you don't try. So yeah, so I hope you sort of decide to apply, go through that process. May or may not work out for you. But even if it doesn't, you're going to come out sort of knowing yourself better, knowing your goals, your dreams, your background, your ambition much better. And and if you need more help, I'm an admissions coach on Leyland. I specialize in international applicants, startup founders applying for MBA, and applicants from family businesses. I have an hourly package and a comprehensive package, and I'll share the link to sort of book time slots with me later on if you feel you do need more help. And so I'm going to open it up to any questions that people might have.
I have a question. Is it okay if I just
say
it out loud?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So how does the timeline differ if someone is planning to graduate early? Because I know that the deferred admission typically takes place during the last semester of or during the final year of your senior year, right? So if you're a final year student, how does that change if you're graduating early? Does the timeline change somehow?
Yeah, so look, so the timeline doesn't change. If you sort of graduate in say December, you are applying for the same cycle as the folks who are graduating in May, right? The subsequent May. So if you are graduating, say if you graduated December 2023, you would be applying with the folks who are graduating in May 2024. With regards to the rest of the timeline, I think it more or less remains the same. You could, if you have a tough semester, you could look at sort of like like this is evenly balanced, but you could look at sort of loading it a little bit at the back and sort of do your GMATs and so on after you get done with your semester. But I find it easier to get done with these parts of the application because this is a stressful process, and the more things that you have under the bag, it sort of makes this entire thing easier.
Right. Also a follow-up question. Do you think the GMAT score would compensate if for a low GPA? Like I think people who apply from the undergrad for deferred admissions, they may have really high GPAs, maybe 4.0, 3.9 or something like that. But if there's an average GPA, maybe 3.5, do you think a GMAT score, a very high GMAT score would compensate for that?
Yeah, I think to a certain extent it would, because look, as I said, they're not looking for the smartest people in the room. They are looking for people, who are smart and smart enough to be able to succeed in the classroom environment. You can demonstrate that through the GMAT and your GPA, and one of the two typically works well. I know, like, for example, I know people who've gotten in with below 700 GMATs, but with near 4.0 GPAs. But yeah, it's a risky strategy. It narrows the odds a bit, but it does narrow the odds, and this is all a game of odds. But if your GPA is bad, it's bad. And so we're going to try to compensate it through the GMAT.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions?
Does GPA weightage differs when you are applying into deferred programs and when you apply after graduating, or is it the same?
Look, it does reduce because there are more factors to consider, but I like it reduces slightly, but it doesn't disappear. Aryan says, I'm graduating from college this year. Can I apply for the deferred MBA next year? No, Aryan, no. Unfortunately not. You have to apply the year you are graduating. Unless you're only allowed to apply in a subsequent year if you directly join a master's program as soon as you graduate from undergrad. Only then you are allowed to sort of like apply the year after.
Hi, Vidhan. Thank you for the session.
Sure.
And I have a question that, my GPA is declining by each semester. Like in first semester, I have something like 9.6, then 9.1, 8.5, and now I am at 8. Okay.
Yeah.
But I have constant learning. Like I have done multiple Coursera courses, 6 months longs, and other internship work offline, virtual internships, remote internships. So how does it will match?
Yeah. So I think that's a good question, and the essay is the best place for you to be sort of trying to go about somewhat explaining that. I'm not going to say it's not going to make an impact. It will sort of slightly tilt the odds against you having a lower GPA, but showing this constant learning is definitely a very powerful way to counteract that.
And also, I am also the current Google DSC lead at my college, and I've
Yeah.
also cleared the Microsoft Associate exam.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that should help, I think.
They're absolutely very powerful ways to show that you still have intellectual competence. Like it's the same logic for the GMAT that we sort of spoke about, where this is another way where you've shown that you're a smart guy.
Vidhan, I had a question.
Yeah, great. Yes.
Thanks for the session. So, just wanted to ask, like, does the round matter in which you apply? Is it like, does the acceptance rate evolve over rounds?
So for traditional MBA programs, yes, it does. Typically, your round ones tend to do slightly better than round 2 and round 3.
And for deferred?
Deferred, there's no rounds. There's only one sort of.
Like, I don't know about Harvard, but I remember reading on the Columbia website, I think they have multiple rounds, if I'm not too wrong.
It's essentially rolling applications. So you can get in, you could do it a little earlier. The earlier you sort of do that, it's definitely better for you because they might have some more time for you to sort of, they might sort of think of you as a more sort of prepared applicant and someone who's on top of their game. And it's also like just more seats are empty at that point. So the earlier you get your applications in, and if your college does have a round, I would try to get in the first round possible.
Okay.
Like this is in your control. So like the reason I say this is like a lot of things are not in your control, but this is in your control. So ensure like if you have a chance, you get it done.
Also, like how so are 3-year undergrads looked upon like badly, or how does that work out?
Yeah. So some colleges don't accept 3-year undergrads. So you have to be from an accredited institute to sort of for that to qualify. If you do qualify, then I think at least it's not looked down upon.
How do we check that?
There's, I believe, a list of colleges that are allowed to apply, that their 3-year program counts. Let me see if I can find that list and share that with you at the end of the session.
Perfect, thanks. Just another last question, sorry.
Yeah.
So how important is the brand of the internship that you do, as well as the job offer that you get? Like, how important is that compared to the work that you do?
It does make a difference. It shows that, like, if you got into a McKinsey, it shows that, you went through the rounds to get into McKinsey. Of course, your work then becomes quite important. And I think a good strategy is, maybe one place, maybe you do one internship for the brand, one internship for really showing impact that you can have. So it also shows your adaptability, the depth, your versatility, and so on.
So
But
do you think like core competency in one field is like more important versus being a generalist with like internships across various domains?
no, it's a good question. So I think that people, HBS is looking for experts in a certain field. And so when I say, so suppose you're an expert in financial technologies and you do, CS internship at a Morgan Stanley, and then you go work at a fintech company, at a fintech startup. I think it shows depth in a certain field is what I was referring to. But yeah, I think the short answer to that is 100%. I think they prioritize masters at whatever it is that you do, because they want to build a class full of leaders who are good at specific things. So your entire class has great people, like, someone who's great at fintech, someone who's great at sort of, health tech, whatever it is. But they don't want one person to be good at fintech, health tech, climate tech, etc. No, because you cannot be.
Right. Makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Hi, Pradhan.
Hi, Vijay.
Thanks again for the session. It was super useful. My question to you was more about, again, when you talked about like introspecting and finding the hook or your own personal story. I did kind of finish my GMAT and I've started looking at the different essays and how to approach them for the schools. One of the things I wanted to ask you is if even how do you come up with a good story for yourself? Because especially coming from, let's say, an overrepresented pool like an Indian tech engineer and so on. The second thing is, how do I condense it into these essays? At least for Harvard, it's a big essay. For other schools, they're much smaller. How do I get my story across?
Yeah, so look, this is the most important part of the process. And this is also like some things, this is often something that I spend most time working with candidates on. The strategy that I take on is that, we do a brain dump where you write down every important part of your life, every incident that was relevant to you, every incident that, changed something about you, that made some form of impact on you. And, once we have it all together in one sort of document, then it's almost something magical where we start to put together where we start to connect the dots. But the first part of it is just putting this all together. And I find that condensing it is not so difficult. Honestly, I find that first part, the brain dump, to be like the more difficult part of it. Once you have all of this together, then you sort of see that as you're connecting the dots, how, you're trying to show that, say, you're a great sort of product manager, whatever. So then you have to show different parts of your personality that address the goals and skills, the skills needed to be a great product manager. And then you fit in those stories that then come together, and then sort of is like it wraps itself up very well.
Thank you. Another small follow-up question. Would you recommend any free resources? I know about Leland, but I'm not from a very strong financial background, so I am not able to afford consultants. So do you have any recommendations for good free resources?
The best path would be to reach out to alums and sort of like and see if you can find an alum from your school who's gone to one of these top MBA programs. They might like somebody who has something in common with you, who then might be willing to help you out for free. But yeah, I would sort of try that.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Vedant. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask like a couple of things. So first thing is with respect to GPA, like if I talk about myself, like I have a very strong leadership background. I've taken roles that like generally not very common to take up. I have good like internships and a good job offer. It's not MBB, but it's like they are the leaders in their own industry, like the best in the world. So like, how do you like, is it really possible that you can compensate your GPA? Because all I've seen is that almost everyone who have gotten into at least HBS, they have like at least a 3.6, 3.7, like very, very strong academic profiles. I've seen people, as you mentioned, that who have a lower GMAT but good GPA get in, but is it the other way around as well?
Look, I got confused by your question a bit, but like, yeah, I think like I think if you're trying to ask if the sort of like your profile sounds strong, your extracurriculars could make up for the if there is not a strong GMAT or GRE. On the other hand, like if someone has had just a strong GMAT and GRE, just on that, you're most definitely not getting in. Like so yeah, but also I think here the important thing to remember is the scale that which you're sort of playing against. You're playing against the best people in the world. You're not talking about best in India. You're not talking about best in Delhi, best in India. You're talking about the top people. It's already a self-selected pool of people who are applying for these top business schools. So when you think about how impressive your achievements are, you have to measure them against the rest of the world.
Got it. But like, are there people who got into HBS even with like a 3.3 for in
Yeah,
the program?
yeah, absolutely. Like, it's possible, but like, I don't know the achievements that we're talking about, and like sort of like on a personal forum might be better to discuss that. But like, if you've done something phenomenal, started the company that's has 100,000 daily active users or whatever, like something super impressive that strikes out, that compensates for the fact that they're going to have to go below their average GPA to sort of accept you. You need to show some form of really, really good excellence in other fields. Anyways, you have to be excellent to get in, but you have to show above and beyond that as well. So it gets tricky, but it's possible. I would not say it's impossible.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a last question, if you don't mind asking.
Yeah, for sure.
So, for applying to the business school, HBS, maybe the deferred admission route, when we submit the resume, how do we basically transition the resume from a technical resume to maybe a business kind of a resume?
Yeah.
Would it be the same? Should we like change some intricacies or like?
No, that's a good question. And here I think you're looking to add some action words there in a technical resume. You're mostly talking about results, wherein here you're talking about actions. And you manage this, you sort of like, but that's sort of essentially that's the transition that you're looking for.
Right. There's nothing that maybe we need to add to make it more business like, something like that.
No, you can't make it up. See, you can't make it up. They're gonna read through it if you make it up. So you've done what you've done, and as you saw, people from STEM backgrounds there's quite a lot of people from STEM backgrounds.
Right.
So you can still
not a bad thing.
absolutely should. Yeah, it's not a bad thing, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Vedant. Thank you so much for your session. It was incredibly informational. I'm a first year undergrad student. I'm looking to apply for deferred MBA programs. So, what do you suggest? Like, I have 3 years in front of me right now. So, what do you suggest I go forward with, like, coming in terms to internships, like in the business sector, and like maybe or other programs that I could explore, which could increase my chances for admission into?
Yeah, so Rubani, I think the way I would think about this, and might think of it as cliche or whatever, but like, I would really do things that you're really passionate about, that you're motivated by. Like, I wouldn't look at okay, I need an internship at Google and Goldman and McKinsey in my 3 summers, so I'm going to get into the best business school. No. You need to, like, whatever you're passionate about, you're going to spend more and more time doing, and that will be very clear in your application. So I would just work on, like, choosing that one thing that matters to you and really sort of like going ham at it, like, going very hard, working towards it, and show that path. Like one thing, and sort of building off of that, like something that I would not recommend people do is like, don't if you had an internship at Goldman and at say Morgan Stanley, and then you say, no, look, I want to go build a social enterprise, no, perhaps you no, perhaps you don't want to do that. Like, make sure that there's a clear path to, like, there's a story to what you're building.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any last questions before we call it?
I have one more question. Sorry.
Yeah, Vijay.
Yeah. So ironically, I would say I come from both the traditional and a non-traditional background. Traditional in the sense that I come from IIIT Hyderabad, which is pretty much a computer science college. A pretty good college, maybe not as high ranked as IITs here. But another thing is that, so I was from academic background. So I'm an MS researcher. I have like 3 to 4 publications. So till my third year, MBA wasn't really on my radar. But
Yeah.
I had a personal incident during my academia, which kind of changed me. And my long-term goal is now to like pursue or start my own company or go into entrepreneurship where I pursue my academic goal. So I would say my story does line up, but one thing is I quite literally have 0 alumni from my college who've gone to Harvard Business School. Maybe to Harvard generally, but 0 to actual any business school, just because my school is so tech focused.
Yeah.
So how do I frame my story such that doesn't feel like my decision to do an MBA is just an ad hoc, spur of a moment decision in my final year, and rather more of,
I think, showing some commitment or some action towards that, something that maybe you want to transition. Now, what was that transition into starting that company? And in that company, have you done some base work as to what you want to build this in, how this will sort of change your life, impact your life, or whatever it is? I think if you're able to show that, I think that automatically shows that this was not a thought that just came to you. So I would just show it that way rather than try to explain it, because they're not going to believe you when you say it. Like, if you show that I've done this, then I think they might sort of believe you.
Cool. Thanks again for that advice.
Yeah.
I just have one question.
Yes.
When applying for different programs,
Yeah.
how many programs would you like recommend applying for? Like, I probably have a set aim on the top 4 business schools. For example, Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and Sloan. So, do I only require to apply to those 4 colleges, or would you recommend that I also apply for Chicago Booth and other colleges as well?
So look, so this question requires a bit more detail, and I think we'd have to look into your profile, how you fit, whether Harvard is a reach school for you or a dream school for you, how are your stats compared to the rest of the people applying. So I don't think I can answer that question without knowing more data, and so happy to fix a call for that, but yeah. I would sort of like, and the number of schools that you decide to apply to depends on, how early you are starting in the game. If you're deciding to start right now, maybe you want to look at 3, maybe 4 schools tops. But if you sort of has started, say, in April, May, you can apply to all the programs for all you know.
Got it. So the time to prepare does that differ?
Yeah, for sure it will differ. For sure it will differ. The timeline that I shared, and I'll share that slide with you all again at the end of this sort of after we finish this call. Like that's a general timeline that works for most applicants, but not all applicants. And I think you'd have to you'd know just how well you prep for tests, how well you you'd know that better than what I can answer at this point.
Okay, and if I may ask, how many programs did you apply to?
I applied to 5 colleges for deferred admission and 2 colleges for direct admission, which is straight from undergrad.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I think we're gonna call it. I'll post the recording of this webinar on YouTube, so you all can view it later if you'd like. And I'll also be sharing the slides with you all. I hope this was, slightly useful, and I wish you all the best of luck with your application journeys. I hope you all do decide to apply. and go through that process. And yeah, so best of luck.
Thanks,
Take care.
Siddhant.
Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye bye.